Okay, please keep in mind that I'm a white woman and, Maya Angelou, I'm so sorry. I'm probably doing your story a disservice, but having your story read aloud is helpful for anyone who is either studying your book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, or is just wanting to read some classic literature. And all right, so I've just given Maya Angelou my caveat there, but thank you for watching along, listening as we read chapter 2 of Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And here we go. When Bailey was 6 and I a year younger, we used to rattle off the times tables with the speed I was later to see Chinese children in San Francisco employ on their abacuses. Our summer gray pot-bellied stove bloomed rosy red during winter and became a severe disciplinarian threat if we were so foolish as to indulge in making mistakes. Uncle Willie used to sit like a giant black Z. He had been crippled as a child, and hear us testify to the Lafayette County Training School's abilities. His face pulled down on the left side as if a pulley had been attached to his lower teeth, and his left hand was only a mite bigger than Bailey's. But on the second mistake or on the third hesitation, his big overgrown right hand would catch one of us behind the collar, and in the same moment would thrust the culprit toward the dull red heater, which throbbed like a devil's toothache. We were never burned, although once I might have been when I was so terrified I tried to jump onto the stove to remove the possibility of its remaining a threat. Like most children, I thought if I could face the worst danger voluntarily and triumph, I would forever have power over it. But in my case of sacrificial effort, I was thwarted. Uncle Willie held tight to my dress, and I only got close enough to smell the clean, dry scent of hot iron. We learned the times tables without understanding their grand principle, simply because we had the capacity and no alternative. The tragedy of lameness seems so unfair to children that they are embarrassed in its presence, and they most recently off nature's mold sense that they have only narrowly missed being another of her jokes. In relief at the narrow escape, they vent their emotions in impatience and criticism of the unlucky cripple. Mama related times without end, and without any show of emotion, how Uncle Willie had been dropped when he was 3 years old by a woman who was minding him. She seemed to hold no rancor against the babysitter, nor for her just God who allowed the accident. She felt it necessary to explain over and over again to those who knew the story by heart that he wasn't born that way. In our society where two-legged, two-armed, strong black men were able to at best eke out only the necessities of life, Uncle Willie, with his starched shirts, shined shoes, and shelves full of food, was the whipping boy and butt of jokes of the underemployed and underpaid. Fate not only disabled him, but laid a double-tiered barrier in his path. He was also proud and sensitive. Therefore he couldn't pretend that he wasn't crippled, nor could he deceive himself that people were not repelled by his defect. Only once in all the years of trying not to watch him, I saw him pretend to himself and others that he wasn't lame. Coming home from school one day, I saw a dark car in our front yard. I rushed in to find a strange man and woman. Uncle Willie said later they were school teachers from Little Rock, drinking Dr. Pepper in the cool of the store. I sensed a wrongness around me, like an alarm clock that had gone off without being set. I knew it couldn't be the strangers. Not frequently, but often enough travelers pulled off the main road to buy tobacco or soft drinks in the only Negro store in Stamps. When I looked at Uncle Willie, I knew what was pulling my mind's coattails. He was standing erect behind the counter, not leaning forward or resting on the small shelf that had been built for him. Erect. His eyes seemed to hold me with a mixture of threats and appeal. I dutifully greeted the strangers and roamed my eyes around for his walking stick. It was nowhere to be seen. He said, my niece, she's just come from school. Then to the couple, you know how children are these days. They play all the day at school and can't wait to get home and play some more. The people smiled, very friendly. He added, "Go out and play, sister." The lady laughed in a soft Arkansas voice and said, "Well, you know, Mr. Johnson, they say you're only a child once. Have you children of your own?" Uncle Willie looked at me with an impatience I hadn't seen in his face, even when he took 30 minutes to loop the laces over his high-top shoes. I thought I told you to go outside and play." Before I left, I saw him lean back on the shelves of Garrett Snuff, Prince Albert, and spark-plug chewing tobacco. "No, ma'am, no children and no wife." He tried to laugh. "I have an old mother and my brother's two children I look after." I don't mind his using us to make himself look good. In fact, I would have pretended to be his daughter if he wanted me to. Not only did I not feel any loyalty to my own father, I figured that if I had been Uncle Willie's child, I would have received much better treatment. The couple left after a few minutes, and from the back of the house I watched the red car scare chickens, raise dust, and disappear toward Magnolia. Uncle Willie was making his way down the long, shadowed aisle behind the shelves, between the shelves and the counter, hand over hand, like a man climbing out of a dream. I stayed quiet and watched him lurch from one side, bumping to the other, until he reached the coal oil tank. He put his hand behind that dark recess and took his cane in the strong fist and shifted his weight on the wooden support. He thought he had pulled it off. I'll never know why it was important to him that the couple, he said later that he'd never seen them before, would take a picture of a whole Mr. Johnson back to Little Rock. He must have tired of being crippled, as prisoners tire of penitentiary bars, and the guilty tire of blame. The high-top shoes and the cane, his uncontrollable muscles and thick tongue, and the looks he suffered of either contempt or pity had simply worn him out. And for one part of an afternoon, he wanted no part of them. I understood and felt closer to him at that moment than ever before or since. During these years in stamps, I met and fell in love with William Shakespeare. He was my first white love. Although I enjoyed and respected Kipling, Poe, Butler, Thackeray, and Henley, I saved my young and loyal passion for Paul Laurence Dunbar, Langston Hughes, James Weldon Johnson, and W.B. Du Bois, Litany at Atlanta. But it was Shakespeare who said, "When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes." It was a state with which I felt myself most familiar. I pacified myself about his whiteness by saying that after all he had been dead so long, it couldn't matter to anyone anymore. Bailey and I decided to memorize a scene from The Merchant of Venice, but we realized that Mama would question us about the author, and that we'd have to tell her about that Shakespeare was white, and it wouldn't matter to her whether he was dead or not, so we chose The Creation by James Weldon Johnson instead. Thank you for listening to Chapter 2 of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings as I read aloud, and please check my channel for Chapter 3. Thank you.